This video has been classified as MA. It is not suitable for people under 15 years.
Good game.
When we started Borderlands 2, we had, we dream up things in terms of story style and design, and of course the game design of Borderlands is about blending, the first-person action genre with the RPG genre, and we created the story of this wild universe that kind of made the behavior that you'd undertake in the game a good thing. And then we also wanted a style, and initially we had all this really wonderful concept art, but as we started building things in our prototypes, the kind of groupthink consensus sort of watered everything down to this kind of realistic kind of look, and I don't know why exactly that tends to happen. I think when I think about other industries, it kind of becomes a little more clear. Like, are you familiar with the automobile industry when they do a concept car? Have you ever seen a concept car? They're amazing, right? They're like, when they do the concept cars, they're like these wild, really sporty kind of things. And then when something actually ends up getting built, it's like the same old boring thing that we've all seen before. The concept cars are always outlandish and interesting, but something happens along the way. And I think, maybe when more people get involved, they start to get afraid. Like, no one's ever bought anything exactly like this, but they bought something like that, which is close. So let's kind of turn this into that. And we found ourselves doing the same kind of thing where our wild concept art started to become the same as everything else, and it started to get sort of realistic. And so the art direction initially was realism. And it was kind of gritty and kind of cool and looked neat, but it didn't have any personality to it. And Borderlands begs for personality. And when you play the game, you can't imagine it any other way, right? So there was a moment when one of my partners, one of the owners of Gearbox, Brian Martell, he decided to explore this idea that he had. He had he visualized in his mind, what if the concept art, which is kind of two-dimensional and a little cartoonish, what if the concept art was the way the real world looked? Like, what if you could take that two-dimensional kind of concept art and build objects in a three-dimensional world that looked like that and light them realistically, light them naturally, have them cast natural shadows so that that's what the real world looked like. And he started to visualize this, and he got really excited. So he started to rally up some other people that could help him sort of prototype this look. A couple of designers, a couple of artists, and a programmer. And I was going about my business. I was heavily involved in the direction and production of the game. And somebody came up to me one day and said, "Hey, Randy, have you seen what Carl's been up to?" And I was like, "What do you mean? He's not up to what he's supposed to be? Like, why would that be a surprising thing?" Like, and they were like, "Oh, never mind." So I went around and tried to figure out what was going on, and I discovered that Carl was one of the guys that Brian kind of roped into this little side quest to try to do this sort of prototype on this other art direction. And you have to understand that we're about halfway through production of the game. We've built all this stuff with this realistic art style, and here's Brian off to the side trying to imagine a completely different look and feel for Borderlands. So I had a conversation with Brian. I pulled him aside. I'm like, "What are you doing, man? What are you doing? Come on, what's at stake here. You know that we've got budgets and we have to be responsible. We're running we're creating entertainment, but we're also running a business. And I know we like to have our fun, but we have to, we're responsible for the livelihoods of all these people. We can't be reckless with how we spend our budget." And he said, "Randy, I think I'm onto something. There's always been kind of a mismatch with the tone and flavor that the game wants to be and this kind of realistic art style. And I think I'm onto something. Can I just build this prototype?" And we agreed that he could use the few people that he had, and I gave him 3 weeks. That he would have 3 weeks to build this sort of sample, and then we'd look at it. And they spent 3 weeks in the tank, and then it came time where I said, "Okay, I need to see this now. Like, let's go." And they set up a demo for me. Brian left town. Like, he was out of there. Now I joke about that. I think he had already had something planned. I don't think he was actually afraid and was escaping. But it was just too convenient that the moment that I was going to look at what he had done, that he wasn't around to be accountable to it. And I went into the conference room as they were setting up this demonstration, and I was sitting there. I hadn't seen anything yet on screen, and I was just thinking, gosh, I'm an idiot. Like, it doesn't matter what I see, I have to kill it. Like, I have to shoot this effort in the head because we're so far along, and it just a reversal of of direction at this stage in development would just be ludicrous. It'd just be a really irrational and not safe decision. So and because I've let them have 3 weeks at it, they're going to be all invested in this now, and I should have just killed it early on. I'm such an idiot. Now they're going to care, they're going to be sad, they're going to be upset with me when I have to destroy this. Why have I got myself in this position? And I'm just sitting there kind of thinking about how I'm going to be dealing with this, already knowing that the only decision I can make is I have to end this ludicrous effort. And then they brought it up on screen, and they'd built this simple kind of prototype environment and a character and some set pieces in this art direction, and they'd done some software to kind of handle the way lighting worked and how shadows were clamped, and kind of some outlining that was an algorithmic process in this rendering software, as well as all of this neat hand painted stuff. And it came up, and when I first saw it, I just from the first moment, I'm like, I've never seen anything quite like this before. And you called it cell shading, but in fact, if you look at the art direction of Borderlands, it's not exactly cell shading, right? Because cell shading tries to take, when we see when cartoons were originally drawn on cells, and they do flat fill and then a simple kind of shadow line around one edge of the character. That it's a very flat filled kind of look. Borderlands takes what might have been drawn in 2 dimensions as cell shading, and then puts it in a 3-dimensional world, lighting it realistically and having realistic shadows. So there's a lot more kind of robust to it, and I'd never seen anything like that. And in addition, inside of the art, like not just the outlines and the shapes that are filled with color, inside there are these little hand-painted doodles. Like when you look at a rock, you can see these little kind of scribbles of wear and tear and detail. And they developed some really sophisticated algorithms to deal with where an outline should appear and where it shouldn't. And this is all done programmatically, right? So like there's certain cases where any object in the distance gets a nice outline, but like a near object that might be occluding part of that distant object doesn't necessarily have a line across it. And so that was some really interesting mathematics to figure out what felt right. And if you look at the game, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. It's very difficult to describe with, the English language isn't quite sufficient to always describe things that are visual and feeling kind of things. But the algorithms that do the outlining was a big part of it. Some of it's about ambient occlusion, which is kind of this technology which allows some shading, some kind of sense of shadow near an object. It somewhat emulates the way the real world lighting works. If you have an object in the world and there's light passing it, there's a bit of a shadow, even in front of where the light's coming, there's a bit of a sort of shadow, an imprint, a sort of aura that it kind of creates with the light and the way light bounces around. And so ambient occlusion was a big part of it, and what it does is it takes what normally we would think of as cell shading, and it makes it 3-dimensional, and it puts it into something that looks like it could be in the real world, right? So, when you see a character with a really exaggerated style, with a chin that's much longer than any normal human's chin might be, or, shoulders that are too broad for any natural human being, and, trapezoidal shape of that character. So his shoulders are broader, but his waist is like smaller than the tiniest child, and these really exaggerated kind of shapes, which if you saw it as a realism style, you'd reject it. When it's done with this kind of comic book, kind of concept art, almost graphic novel look, it excuses the exaggeration. This world that we've created, it's like this horrible, evil, twisted, dangerous, ugly place. I mean, the place where we were spending time in Borderlands is really an ugly place, but the art direction made it beautiful. And then on top of that, I realized it's loose because of the exaggerated styles that are now coming with it. There's a personality here that the game always begged for, because we've always kind of embraced this sort of humor and the fun of the game we wanted to make. We wanted it not to be so serious that you're feeling sad. We wanted it to be loose and fun, and we just wanted to have a good time. And now this art direction was clearly having a good time, and I thought, man, this is amazing. So then I realized I want this really bad. Like I want this really. It's still a bad decision, but I really want this. So then I got the producers together and I said, listen, look at this, because we built this 3 weeks. We knew what that took. Take that information, the data of what it took to build this, extrapolate that over everything, and tell me what it costs. And let's see if we can pull this off. And they did the math and they showed their work, and we it turned out we could do it. We could afford it. We could afford it. Now we'd have to spend a little more than we originally intended to, but it was within our risk tolerance. And I'm like, okay, let's do it, so full steam ahead, we turned the wheels and we went for it. And then I realized about, a month later, we kind of have a publishing partner, Take-Two and 2K Games. We probably should tell them that we're being so wild.
That was fun.
It was pretty interesting. Christoph loved it. He thought, wow, this is special. The marketing team and the sales team, they were ecstatic. They're like, now we have something we could really sell. This is totally distinct. There's nothing like this, and it's visual. How great is that? The production people just were terrified. They were just like, oh my God, what have you done? Everything's off the rails. So they were freaked out. But it was a really fun process, and ultimately, I was really proud to be partnered with 2K that day, because they said, listen, this is your game. It's your craft. It's your art. We're going to follow you on this. So if this is what you want to do, we'll get your back. We'll be on your team. And that was I've been in so many situations where it would be very easy for the suits to use their power of the purse to exert the creative will and just crush creativity. And in that situation, they really backed us. And clearly, they don't regret it, because Borderlands went on to be a great success. And we, of course, feel that there's no other way Borderlands could be. So I'm really proud of that moment.
Oh, damn, you looking good, ladies. Let's get to work.
It really takes something to break that tendency to be safe. Especially when we risk so much, whether it's the money that we're investing in the project or our passion and our heart and our time. Like when we're going to put a lot of time into something, we want people to like it. And we're afraid sometimes that if we do something that no one's ever seen before, they might not get it. Like we know what things that people like because we can see the things that are successful out in the world. And so we always tend to try to imitate those things just a bit. But if you look at the Borderlands art style, there's nothing like it. So we had to break that tendency. We had to break that safety and allow us to be unsafe and allow us to actually cut loose and let our own personalities and our own identities and our own interests and passions and feelings into the art and into the style of the game. And as the culture broke and allowed for that, we just kind of, it was like the lunatics running the asylum. We just went nuts, and it was just a big party. I mean, it was just so fun, and there's so much momentum and passion and energy. And when you play Borderlands and when you play Borderlands 2, you can feel it. You can feel the people behind the game. When I see it, I know who's behind the game, so I can actually detect the individual personalities and influences. But even if you don't know any of us, you can feel that someone cared, and someone had heart, and someone really tried, and they wanted to kind of let their personality come through. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's become such a thing, and it's special. It is very challenging, because it's such a dynamic game, and there's so many permutations of different skills with all the different characters and the abilities of each of the characters depending on how you play them. Each skill tree, and there's 3 skill trees per character, has a completely different play style behind it. And then when you add on top of that all of the gear and what's possible with the procedural weapon generation system, where there's gear that you can find that almost edge cases that kind of break the boundaries of what should be reasonable and rational because of it's procedurally generated, right? So you get these edge cases, these really the endpoints of that bell curve where that thing is just ludicrously powerful. So balancing the game is difficult. We generally the process is long and iterative, and it involves playing and building and playing and building and iterating through that over and over again and getting a lot of eyes on the game. Also, it's about collecting telemetry. So anyone that's playing the game, whether we're watching them or not, we're getting data. We're getting telemetry from it, like where are they, how well are they doing, what weapons are they using, what enemies are they facing, are they living, are they dying, are they succeeding, are they failing, where are they failing, why. We're getting a lot of that telemetry. That helps too. And it's very important to kind of schedule it such that you always have a sense of challenge, but you always feel that there's a path to victory, and even if you fail, you understand why, so that you can, do something about that. There are times in both Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2 where we do have walls. They're not the only wall, but it's very important to know, especially if you come to the game from the shooter genre, from the first-person action genre, you're not really familiar with the idea of leveling up to get power, right? If you've never played RPGs, you don't understand that, if I'm the same level as my opponent, it's an even fight. But if he outlevels me, I'm dead. But if I outlevel him, I'm kind of overpowered, and it becomes easier. You can kind of, arrange for your own skill difficulty, your own difficulty level by, managing how much you're grinding versus how much you're kind of attacking the critical path. If you're going fast through the critical path, you'll find that the enemies tend to be a little bit ahead of you and the difficulty is very high. But if you're very patient, you do side quests and you kind of level up and take your time, you can outpace the enemies through that critical path, and you'll find the game can be easier. We do put walls up though to teach you that. I don't want to spoil anything for Borderlands 2, but in Borderlands 1 it was the Bonehead boss that was outside of Firestone. And most of the people, that was the first kind of way they went. They turned right. It's just sort of a natural tendency. We just sort of turn right. We go right down this hall, and there he is. And there's some enemies there, and they're all like level 9 to level 11. And we're like level 6. And so we just get pummeled and beat, and it's a wall. But we realize that there's this whole other world that we kind of just walked past to get there. So we turn around and do that, and we find all kinds of things that we're able to deal with. We find quests and other kind of adventures that we kind of go on, and we realize at a point, hey, I'm level like 11 or 12 now. I'm going to go back and deal with that Bonehead thing. And sure enough, right around that time, a mission happens in the mainline quest, which says, hey, you need to deal with Bonehead anyway. And that's kind of a neat kind of experience. And we've kind of planned those little kind of educational walls in Borderlands 2 as well, and we've gotten a lot better at it too. The experience, there's so many lessons that we have to learn still, and we learn lessons from each experience. And ultimately, if our goal is to entertain people, we want to take each lesson and get better.
I want to make, for the lack of a better term, the girlfriend skill tree. This is, I love Borderlands and I want to share it with someone, but they suck at first-person shooters.
I wasn't there when Jonathan Hemingway, who's one of our designers who has a lot to do with the skills, he was explaining some of the design of the Necromancer character, which is a new character that will be added to Borderlands 2 after the game launches. And this is really exciting. And in his design, he's thinking about the use cases. And one of the use cases he imagined was, okay, here's a player who's played a lot of Borderlands 2. We're now, many weeks after launch, and he's probably got a lot of skill. So this player wants something that maybe is a more advanced character. So one of the skill trees of the Necromancer allows for really kind of advanced play where the more skilled you are, the more capable you'll be with this character. And if you are extremely skilled, there's some nuances there that will allow that character to be extremely effective relative to the others. Another use case he imagined is, imagine a gamer who loves the game and maybe has a friend or a relative that isn't a gamer, but loves the game so much we want shared experiences, right? And that's a big feeling and philosophy at Gearbox. That's why we do co-op with such an investment. Shared experiences, right? So he wants to invite this non-gamer into his hobby with him. So imagine if there can be an additional character that can come later that has some things that allows a non-skilled player to feel useful, right? So the skill in question, if you miss and the bullets hit the ground or hit the wall, there's a chance that they'll reflect and hit the enemy. Since I started making games, I've always tried to get my grandparents to respect what I do, because my grandparents grew up in a world where there were no video games. And certainly the Wii helped, because Grandpa can bowl, and that's cool. But they don't really get it. And certainly the idea of playing a first-person shooter is just completely, like, they don't want to go over the skill. But imagine then I can use this skill and have my grandfather play split screen with me, and maybe he's looking at the ground the whole time and pulls the trigger, but it feels good, because that's one of the fun things about a shooter is the kind of feedback you get. You can move and aim and pull the trigger, and it feels like, and it's all simulated. It's in this virtual simulation, so it's nice and fun and safe, and imagine now when he does that, he actually kind of gets some positive feedback. He's not just useless and feeling like, I'm dying, I'm not helping, this is terrible. He's actually like, I'm doing something cool, and it's working. Now, it's not the path to being the most powerful, because it is kind of a nerfed skill. Yes, if you build out that skill to the max, 50% of your shots will reflect and hit an enemy, but you'll only be doing 50% damage with all shots. So it's not really the path to be the most effective, but it is a path for a less skilled gamer to be able to feel useful and to be useful in the game, and to maybe have that opportunity to develop those root FPS skills, right? To learn over time, because it takes just a few minutes if you stick with it to learn how to move and aim and how to slide around the map and get your brain wired to these controllers. And you just need some encouragement along. Now, the fact that my particular grandfather is not good at first-person shooters. Is that an indictment against all grandfathers? Of course not. Of course not. And the design of the skill, it is not biased towards any gender or any age or any race or any sexual orientation. And in fact, in my worldview and in, I like to think the philosophy of the entire studio, discrimination is horrible. And we've come a long way as a species, but there's still a lot of really evil, wicked things in this world, and people that judge one another or believe that other people aren't as capable. And that's really sad when you think about it in the context of video games, which should be the most welcoming, the most encompassing hobby of them all. If you can use a controller and you can see the screen and hear the sounds, it doesn't matter how old you are or what gender you are or where you come from or where you happen to live. There's fun to be had, and there's skill to be developed. So I think what happened was Jonathan was talking about his own girlfriend who happens to be a non-gamer. Now again, is that an indictment against all girlfriends? Of course not. That's ludicrous. That is ludicrous. And in fact, when you think about what the intent behind the design of this character is, you kind of want a guy like Jonathan on the team of design, because he's actually thinking about inclusiveness, right? He's actually and that's one of the things that frustrated me so much. And I think it's kind of dishonest, because there were a lot of journalists there that day, and all of them talked about the skills of the Necromancer and how cool this character was. But one journalist decided to take a quote and kind of manipulating it, knowing that the readers would imagine, that guy's a sexist, and get controversy about that.
All around the stackless plant, the stalker chased a bandit. The stalker thought 'twas all in fun. Hop! Goes the bandit.
In my world, all discrimination is just evil and needs to die. And if there's any good that can come from this, it's that, I think it's really nice that if we see something that seems like it's wrong, that we do speak up about it. And although, this was kind of the consequence of some manipulation and some dishonest kind of angling for the interests of a journalist trying to get readers for a site, I do feel good about every time we have a chance to look at something and say, you know what, discrimination's evil. And that needs to stop, and I think that's really cool, and I think that's kind of if there's any positive that comes from that, it's that idea, and I hope everyone kind of helps take steps towards inclusiveness, and that's one of the great things I think our hobby has to offer. And so for what it's worth, I'm happy to be a part of the inclusiveness, and I'm always going to drive and hold that torch.